Welcome to this time of reflection as we share in looking at the Gospel of Luke, chapter 9, verses 28 through 36. This is one of those passages that we come to every year, shared from one of the Gospels. This time it is from Luke, where there are many stories, other stories that do not appear and be lifted up every single year. This is one that does, just as the story of Jesus' birth, his wilderness experience, and his final days in Jerusalem. Why these and not others? Because they mark pivotal moments in the Christian history, in the Christian story. They mark moments when the clarity of who Jesus is was revealed. Today's passage is commonly referred to as the Transfiguration, not to be confused with transformation, though it has its own place in this story too. As we talk about that, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, the cornerstone of this story is the change in Jesus' outward appearance as he prayed alone, as he often did. As readers, we are set up to believe that he was a little ways off, apart from the disciples that he took with him, and that the intention of being there was not necessarily for their benefit, but a private moment for Jesus that they just happened to witness because they hadn't fallen asleep. Yet, on account of their witness, the significance of what they saw was so impactful that Peter suggests that they remain there on the mountaintop in that moment of glory. We get that, don't we? There are moments in our lives that seem so perfect that we simply don't want to return back to the everyday challenges that lie in the valley. Yet we know we must. And like in this story, when the voice of God is heard responding to Peter in the cloud saying, "This is my son, listen to him," we know that our best actions as people of faith don't happen separate from the world, but rather right smack dab in the middle of it. That's when the transformation part of the story comes in. While Jesus' appearance was transfigured, much like the Old Testament story of Moses when he came back from the mountaintop having seen God, those witnessing that physical change could not have helped but been changed themselves. The change that came over the three who accompanied Jesus, Peter, James, and John, without a doubt was a transforming experience. It brought a transformation within. This part of the story we heard Ted read, ends in that last line saying, "And they kept silent," referring to the three disciples. And they kept silent. One might be inclined to ask why. When something extraordinary happens in our lives, aren't we often so eager to share it with others? Yes, and in some ways we do. But what if we didn't think anyone would understand? That by trying to explain the events would somehow diminish the experience. Perhaps we might remain silent too. Not to mention what they were thinking, that this entire experience and what it must have meant to them. A personal transformation is not something that can so easily be shared with others. It's hard to find the words to explain it. Rather, it's an interchange that becomes outwardly visible through behavior and action. Perhaps their silence was derived from their own struggle to comprehend what they witnessed and what it demanded of them. They kept silent because they didn't know what else to do. One thing is certain, their mountaintop experience was a sacred moment. And that is always true about profound encounters with God. They're sacred moments. Sacred moments that words are inadequate to describe because they leave us speechless in awe and wonder. Mountaintop experiences occur throughout the biblical narrative, perhaps more symbolically because it is in those places that the height of the encounters gives greater vision and perspective than were they at ground level. We know this to be true in our personal lives. We have all encountered moments that words cannot express, that only we can fully know within our souls to be true and profound. And they are our mountain top moments, and we cherish them. We are transformed by them, maybe even transfigured in a sense, not to suggest that we are anything like Jesus, but a radiant glow that flows from us for having seen and experienced. But perhaps I say too much, trying to comprehend and make sense of what this passage tells us, really. The 3 disciples kept silent. Maybe there is a lesson in that. When the voice of God speaks the command to listen, we can't be listening when we are too busy talking, filling the silence, can we? Listen maybe is the most profound thing we can do first, before we say anything. Listen to what is there to experience, to know, to take in, and to encounter. Many of us are uncomfortable with silence, certainly prolonged silence. We'd rather some background noise. When there's too much silence, we tend to squirm in our seats, clear our throats a little, something to counter the quiet, because perhaps we are afraid of what may arise in that soundless space. Meditation is much about finding comfort in silent moments. For what arises might just be, and often is, something we need to hear, to experience, to know the voice of God, the whisper of the Spirit. Are we willing then to take from this passage the discipline to listen, that we might hear what God is saying to us in this moment? Not only is this of value on a personal level, but as the church today. I read a commentary on this passage from Reverend Jane Hunt, who put it this way, and she said, "I am reminded that God's people are all too often silent when we should speak. And yet, do you suppose if our first response were silence," she says, "we might be all that more ready to speak when the time comes?" In the perspective of our faith community and what the future will look like for that spiritual gathering of souls, our spiritual gathering together, I believe there is nothing more important than to honestly and completely take time to be in the silence in order that we might listen, and in listening, that we might truly hear. We know that to listen to Jesus is to follow a call of service, of love and compassion, of justice and care. In today's world, wrought with all of its challenges, who are we called to be in our community and in our world? Perhaps the best thing we can do first is to keep silent and to listen. Blessings and peace. Amen.